it sounds fantastic, but you could just, for example, you could be doing it to somebody without them even knowing you. You could be talking to somebody in this condition in a pub or something, and then suddenly they'll get out of the chair and walk away.
Has happened.
And that would be that is just fantastic, you know, that you can do things like that.
We had a man, I spoke to this gentleman in a pub quite a few years ago. Basically, when I was discovering that this needed a name, because without a name like Shak, it's just an anything or a nothing. So we give it a name just so we understood what particular part of this therapy we're talking about. So we call it Shak. Shak meaning to remedy. Again, like as you just said, there was a man sat in a bar in a wheelchair. His family had brought him, and the son-in-law was called Mike, and he knew about my hypnosis skills, etc., and said, "We've been told that my father-in-law has got psychosomatic leg loss, basically." So I said, what's happened was he had an injection of dye into his spine so they could do this test. And he felt that it had hit some form of nerve and stopped his legs from moving, and he was adamant that he was not going to be able to walk ever again. So I went over and just sat and talked to this chap, and never mentioned anything about his legs, didn't mention anything about that at all. But what I did do was instill metaphors. I used the metaphors as part of this normal language. It was a conversation that he thought was totally stupid, irrelevant. Why on earth are you talking about this particular thing when you know, we're in a pub? What do you want to talk about this thing for? Which I won't say what it is just yet. And within minutes, he started to scratch his leg. So I said, "Is your leg itching?" He went, "Yeah." "Well, how do you know it's itching if you can't feel it?" "Well, I can now for some reason." And he says, "I've been talking to you." And he could see the intrigue in his face, and I'm laughing now. Everybody else is laughing.
And he didn't know he was having been.
He didn't know he was getting it at all. He had no idea.
I bet that felt really good, didn't it?
It is nice. I must have.
It felt fantastic when you just made him get up out of the chair, and all of his family were just. Yeah.
It is nice.
But that felt marvellous, didn't it?
Yeah. It's been a bit, for want of a better word, and this isn't a swear word. We in the UK call it being cocky. And it's been, you know, it's like showing off a little bit, but it's to help someone.
It's done it in the nicest possible way. It's not just like showing off a new car. It's done to help somebody, and it's done almost casually as well.
Well, it is. It's very blasé.
Yeah.
That's the good thing about this as well. As another example, where I had a lady, she had the most amazing rheumatoid arthritic fingers I've ever seen. They was totally twisted, sort of like this all over. And one thing that she wanted to be able to do was to, as she says, wring out a cloth of water so she could wash her windows. And she couldn't get her arm any higher than this sort of height. Besides, her hands was all hurting as well. So I instilled a little bit of Shak, just by talking metaphorically. And the lady was in her 80s, and so she didn't have a clue what I was talking about, but she was very polite, and she pretended that she understood. But what happened was that she was very amazed, because this lady smoked, and what she did was use her two hands to get the cigarette packet, open this up, take the cigarette out with her mouth, and her two hands together to light the lighter, to light the cigarette. After my metaphors, after talking to her, I also instilled some other suggestions which we can add to during the DVD. And this lady, without realising it, picked up the cigarette packet with one hand, lifted the lid with the other hand, took out the cigarette, put it in her mouth, took one hand and lit the cigarette with the other hand, put the packet down, didn't think nothing of it until her daughter turned around and said, "Mother, do you just realise what you've just done?" She went, "What?" She said, "You're smoking a cigarette with one hand." She said, "Oh!" And her fingers she was forgetting about this pain. Totally gone. And she loosened the joints as well. So they're still sort of quite twisted. Now, another thing what happened was, I said to her, a fly went by, and she swatted the fly. Up here.
She wouldn't be able to do that before.
She was very, again, Denise, sadly Denise has passed away, but a very good friend of mine. She said, "Mother, look what you're doing now." She's just, her arms up in the air. She said, "I'll be able to wring a cloth out, be able to wash my windows." This lady was over the moon. And this was just in the space of
it was suddenly just dawned on them what they'd got.
Yeah, it's just using these metaphors. You can use them all the time, and you can tell somebody you're actually going to do it, and it'll still work. You can just do it without that person knowing it will work. It's very clever, you know what I mean? So I've had people who don't want any false hopes. So basically, I've not told them that we're going to do it. We just do it.
And it works.
And it works.
Suddenly they're out of the wheelchair, and it's fabulous, isn't it?
The old man in the pub, he eventually, after scratching his leg, would took the itch and made it go around to the other leg. Made both his legs itch. Then made him realise that he could move his legs. He took his feet off the wheelchair and stood himself up and gave me a big hug because he was crying.
What was the rest of the family's reaction?
Crying.
Yeah.
So, and the girl with the who'd been in a really bad state for 7 years after suffering a massive stroke whilst giving birth to one of her children. This young boy had never known his mum any other way except being sat in what I call a fetal position. On the left side, her left arm was curled up in the fetal position, her left leg was twisted in the fetal position. She couldn't speak, so he couldn't understand what she was saying. She slavered quite a lot, and she also had a straw in a cup of tea, and she used to drink through the straw, and she was like this, her left eye was permanently blinking, and her sister, who had previously for a stroke problem she had, that went, and she asked me if I go see her sister. I said, well, this will be a nice, for me it was a big challenge. I thought 7 years like this, never known anything else as a child. I thought, yeah, I want this challenge. I want to see how powerful this really does get. So I went in, she's living with her mum, and sat on the chair across the living room area was two ladies from the spiritualist church who do healing. And they're constantly there doing healing, spiritual healing, which I think is absolutely lovely. It's marvellous what they do. It does work, it's very powerful. This lady who I can't mention, she doesn't want me to mention her name. And I always say the same thing, what letter comes after S in the alphabet? I said, do you have mum's tea? I said, yes please, I'd love one. So she made me a nice big cup of tea. I sat talking to this lady, who I'll call Mrs. X, for want of a better name. So I talked to Mrs. X, and just by talking to her very fast, in a stimulative way, using these particular metaphors, she was very baffled, looking at me very confused, and sort of like this. And I was purposely making her answer my questions so I can get her to talk to me. Within the space of half a cup of tea, she was sat doing this. So I said, what's the matter? She went, my tongue feels really funny. I said, I can understand what you're saying now. And the speech started to come back. And Mum came out of the kitchen and said, say that again. She said, say what? I said, you're talking. She went, I know I am. And then she realised the penny dropped again for her. She went, oh! And then she lifted her hand up, moved it, her left hand was coming back. The feelings are coming back in her arm. Gradually all this left side's coming back to normal. The two ladies from the spiritualist church were crying because they're just watching this happen before their very eyes. The sister and the sister's girlfriend both were crying. Mum was crying. I'm sat there thinking, this is brilliant, you know, it's working even after a 7-year one. This is fantastic. So now I'm realising just how powerful this shack is. And the last part was looking at her left leg, and I said to her, so how's your left leg? And she said, I can't move that. I can't even feel it. So I just did one little thing, which will show you during the Shak treatment. One little thing, and she nearly shot out of the chair when the feeling just rushed back into her leg, and her leg shot forward in a nice straight line. And she's just looking and looking at me, and I said to her, you think I'm weird, don't you? And she went, I bloody do. It was fantastic. Then the nicest thing happened. Also, the woman was self-harming. She was burning cigarettes into her left arm because she had no feeling there, and she was depressed. 7 years sat in a chair. I think anybody would be depressed. No wonder. This weird man who was supping her cup of tea, making her talk, making her feel, making her move, making these limbs come back to life again, making her balance out a full body. She just got up out of the chair,